The Roman soldier is often remembered as unbreakable. Broad shoulders, polished armor, a shield locked beside another shield, forming a wall of iron and discipline. He stands in paintings, in films, in textbooks as a symbol of strength that never bends. A figure carved from certainty, a man who marches without hesitation and fights without fear. You have seen this image many times. It is clean, it is heroic, and it is incomplete. Because most Roman soldiers did not spend their lives charging into battle beneath bright banners. They spent their days in silence, in narrow spaces, in cold air that never fully left the lungs. Their strength was not always loud. It was often quiet, repetitive, and slowly worn thin by routine. Before any enemy appeared on the horizon, the real test had already begun, inside the walls that were meant to protect them. Far to the north of the Roman world, beyond the warmth of Italy and the crowded cities of the empire, stood one of Rome's most imposing frontiers, Hadrian's Wall. From a distance, it looks like a line of stone drawn across the landscape, a boundary between order and uncertainty. But step closer, and the wall stops feeling like a line. It begins to feel like a weight. The stones are thick, stacked with intention. They do not invite movement. They restrict it. The passages are narrow enough that two men must turn their shoulders to pass. Stairs rise steeply, forcing the body inward with every step. The wind moves across the top, but rarely through it, leaving pockets of still, heavy air below. Sound does not travel far here, though it strikes the stone and falls away quickly, as if even echoes are not allowed to linger. This structure was built to control space, to channel bodies into predictable paths, to slow intruders and protect the frontier. And it succeeded, but the wall did not choose who it pressed against. The same stone that blocked enemies also pressed against the men stationed within it. Defense and confinement shared the same shape. Inside, openness disappears. Courtyards are measured for efficiency, not comfort. Doorways shave the edges of shoulders. Ceilings hover low overhead, reminding every man of the stone above him. Nothing expands. Everything narrows. Over time, the body adjusts to these dimensions, but the mind notices the limits long after the muscles have memorized them. This was not a temporary camp erected for a season of war. It was permanent, heavy, unmoving, a place where years could pass without the landscape changing at all. And within this unchanging structure, soldiers lived compressed lives. 8 men to a room was the standard arrangement. Not 8 friends, not 8 volunteers, 8 assigned bodies sharing a single enclosed space. Sleeping platforms lined the walls. Weapons hung overhead. Shields leaned against spare sandals and ration bags. There were no partitions, no private corners, no door that closed behind a single individual. Privacy was not removed. It was never offered. Breathing became shared. Warmth became shared. Fatigue became shared. At night, the air thickened with the scent of damp wool, leather straps, oil from lamps, and the quiet exhale of men too tired to speak. When one soldier shifted, others felt it. When one coughed, the sound did not belong to him alone. It filled the room and settled on every sleeping platform. Silence existed only in brief intervals, and even then it was fragile, easily broken by the scrape of metal or the creak of timber. Hierarchy did not end at the doorway. One man held authority inside the room, usually the most experienced or most trusted. The newest soldier learned quickly where he stood, often closest to the coldest wall, the draft near the door, the space where discomfort gathered first. Rank decided not only duties, but proximity to warmth, to quiet, to rest. Pressure flowed downward, invisible but constant. Daily life unfolded in that same confined air. Eating, cleaning gear, preparing for watch, returning from labor, leaving again. The room was rarely empty. Someone was always entering. Always exiting, always adjusting armor, or folding a blanket that never truly dried. Irritations had nowhere to escape. Arguments did not explode. they lingered. Complaints were swallowed because being labeled difficult carried consequences. In a closed system, attention was a burden few wanted. The body adapts to closeness. It learns how to sleep through noise, how to rest beside another man's boots, how to ignore the steady drip of condensation along stone. But adaptation is not comfort. It is compromise repeated until it becomes routine. Beyond these rooms lay the larger structure, corridors, stairwells, gates, all built with the same intention: control, order, containment. The wall did not change with seasons. It did not soften in summer or loosen in spring. Rain darkened the stones, frost silvered them. But their presence remained exact and indifferent. Men rotated in and out over the years, but the wall stayed the same, measuring each new arrival against dimensions that never adjusted. This is where the myth begins to thin. Strength here was not forged in triumphant clashes beneath open skies. It was shaped in narrow doorways, in shared breath, in the quiet endurance of spaces that never widened. The soldier remembered by history often stands tall and shining. The soldier who lived here stood hunched beneath armor that rarely left his shoulders, inside rooms that never fully emptied, within walls that never seemed to breathe. Before the battles, before the marches, before the legends, there was this life of compression, and it pressed inward every single day. 8 men shared a room, but none of them woke rested. While sleep ended, it did not restore. The body rose because it had to, not because it was ready. Outside, the air was already cold, already moving, already waiting. Inside, joints stiffened from the night before protested quietly as armor was lifted back onto shoulders that never fully recovered. There was no moment of ease between sleeping and working. The day did not begin. It resumed. On this northern frontier, the Roman soldier was not defined by battle. He was defined by labor. The wall demanded attention without pause. Stone cracked under frost. Turf loosened after rain. Ditches filled with mud and debris that had to be cleared again and again. Nothing stayed finished. Repairs were temporary victories against a structure that was always drifting back toward decay. The work did not build glory. It delayed collapse. And tools were issued before weapons: picks, shovels, ropes, baskets. Hands wrapped around wood and iron before they ever touched a sword. The rhythm of the day was not the clash of shields, but the scrape of metal against earth, the dull thud of stone set upon stone, the steady exhale of men lifting weight that never seemed to grow lighter. Blisters hardened, then split, then hardened again. Shoulders burned until the sensation faded into a background hum the mind learned to ignore. You did not complete the wall. You prevented it from failing for one more day. Labor did not replace duty. It overlapped with it. A soldier might spend hours hauling stone only to be rotated immediately onto watch, climbing narrow steps to stand against wind that cut through wool and leather alike. Rest was interrupted, not scheduled. Sleep became something borrowed in fragments rather than given in full. Time belonged to the system, and the system rarely returned it. Progress was difficult to see. Mist rolled in from the hills and erased the edges of what had been repaired. Rain darkened new stone until it was indistinguishable from the old. The landscape did not acknowledge effort. Exhaustion stopped being an event and became a condition, a constant presence carried in the lower back, in the knees, in the quiet heaviness behind the eyes. Food arrived late in the day, after most strength had already been spent. The ration was calculated, not generous. Grain formed the center of every meal, wheat or barley ground into flour, baked into coarse bread, or boiled into thick porridge. It filled the stomach. It silenced hunger long enough for the next shift. And meat appeared occasionally, not regularly. Fresh vegetables were uncertain this far north. Their absence felt more than noticed. Meals repeated with little variation, the same grain, the same texture, the same muted taste. Eating was quick, practical, often done wherever space allowed. There was no ceremony, no anticipation. The body accepted the fuel, but fatigue remained. What had been spent during the day was not fully replaced at night. The imbalance began quietly, almost politely, before it demanded recognition. Supply lines stretched across long distances. Weather delayed deliveries. Roads deteriorated. When provisions finally arrived, they were preserved to survive the journey. Salted, dried, hardened. Bread stiffened quickly. Grain attracted pests. Freshness became rare. Satisfaction disappeared entirely. Our rank decided how this scarcity played out. Officers ate separately and better. Enlisted men ate together, and the lowest-ranking soldiers ate last. Hunger moved downward through the room, settling on the same bodies again and again. No one announced the change, but the body kept the record. Fat thinned first, faces sharpened, shoulders narrowed. Muscle did not vanish. It transformed. It became lean, economical, built for endurance rather than display. Strength stopped meaning size. It began to mean lasting longer than yesterday. Survival replaced growth. The mirror, if one existed, would not have shown a hero from a mural. It would have shown a man shaped by repetition and rationing, by cold mornings and unfinished repairs. Then came the moments when the body could no longer negotiate. There was no hospital waiting behind the gates, no quiet wing reserved for recovery. Care was basic. Bandages, herbs, rest when it could be spared. And time was rarely spared. The sick remained where they slept on the same platforms, breathing the same shared air as everyone else. Illness did not isolate itself. It circulated. It often began with a cough, dry at first, then deeper. The sound carried in the darkness, striking stone and returning softer but persistent. Heat gathered beneath wool blankets, then drained away, leaving shivers that rattled the frame. Minor wounds reopened with each lift of a tool. Hands split along old lines, joints swelled. Clean water was not always available. Mud returned on boots and fingers, on the edges of bandages, meant to keep infection away. What should have healed lingered instead. By morning, many still rose for duty. Stopping marked weakness. Weakness invited replacement. The system did not pause for individuals. A man might stumble through the day, vision narrowing at the edges, sweat forming beneath armor despite the cold wind. Others noticed, but intervention was rare. Each soldier balanced his own limit against the silent expectation to continue. When someone finally collapsed, the reaction was practical, not dramatic. He was moved aside. Tools changed hands. The shift continued. Deaths like this were not accompanied by ceremony. Bedding was reused. Platforms were filled. The wall did not mourn, it endured, and so did the men who remained, carrying forward the memory not as grief, but as caution. A quiet understanding that the line between standing and falling was thinner than it appeared. Yet even as bodies wore down, the demand for readiness never eased. Training continued year-round. Shields were raised until arms trembled. Formations were drilled until feet moved from habit rather than thought. Weapons were handled daily, edges checked, straps tightened. Equipment failure was treated as personal failure because the consequences were shared by all. There was no clear boundary between training and duty. After drills came watch. After watch came labor. After labor came interrupted sleep. Armor was worn even when it was not strictly necessary. Weapons remained within reach. The weight never fully left the shoulders. The mind learned to remain half a step away from danger, even on days when nothing happened. Hours passed staring across empty land where wind bent grass and shadows shifted without meaning. Oh, the body stayed tense anyway. Sleep grew shallow, muscles never fully released. Most battles here occurred in imagination, rehearsed threats, anticipated alarms, footsteps that never arrived. This was the cost of permanent readiness. Violence was brief when it came, but waiting for it stretched endlessly. The fight followed the soldier even when the field was empty, carried in posture, in breathing, in the quiet tightening of hands around unseen hilts. Day after day, the pattern repeated. Work, ration, watch, training, fragmented rest, again and again and again. This was the true shaping force of life on the frontier, not the clash of armies, not the banners, not the brief thunder of combat, but the steady compression of routine. By the time a real battle appeared on the horizon, though the soldier who stepped forward had already been molded by something far more constant: cold stone, limited food, shared air, and the unending demand to continue. A life shaped by stone and routine could not be endured without pause. Even within strict systems, small spaces opened, brief interruptions that allowed the body to remember it was still human. These moments did not change the structure. They softened it for a short while, the way warmth softens frozen hands before the cold returns. Beyond the gates and within nearby forts were bathhouses where steam gathered thick in the air. Armor was set aside, leather straps loosened. Heat reached joints that had been stiff for days, easing them slowly, almost cautiously, as if relief itself needed permission. Dirt lifted from skin in dark streams that curled along the floor. And for a few minutes, the soldier was not a rank, not a tool of the frontier, just a body standing in warmth. Conversation stayed low. No one described the day in detail. Work was understood without being spoken. When the steam faded, some men turned to writing. Thin wooden tablets, simple ink, careful strokes from fingers still rough with labor. Messages were short, requests for supplies, greetings to family, confirmations that the writer was still alive. Home appeared in these lines without poetry. Distance was felt more than described. Writing did not close the gap. It outlined it, giving shape to something that otherwise remained invisible. Noise sometimes followed. Dice struck wooden tables with sharp clicks. Laughter rose quickly, then settled just as fast. A drink dulled the edges of fatigue without erasing it. Arguments sparked and burned out in minutes, because tomorrow waited too close to be ignored. These were not celebrations, they were pressure valves, tolerated releases that kept the larger system intact. None of these comforts lasted long. Steam gave way to cold air. Ink dried, cups emptied, orders returned. Men walked back through narrowing corridors into rooms shared by 8 bodies once more. Gear stacked inward, breath mixed again. The routine closed around them with familiar weight. These pauses did not make the wall kind. They made it bearable. They were reminders of skin beneath wool, of hands capable of holding something other than tools, of voices that were not commands. And so life continued, not through glory, not through triumph, but through repetition softened by brief moments of normality. On the frontier did not hold because soldiers were endlessly heroic. It held because they adapted, because they endured, because they learned how to continue inside dimensions that never expanded. The Roman soldier remembered by history often stands tall in polished armor, framed by victory. The soldier who lived behind Hadrian's wall stood within narrow rooms, limited rations, and unending routines. His strength was quieter. It was measured in mornings he rose despite fatigue, in watches he kept through wind and silence, in days repeated until they blurred together. Strength here was not loud. It was persistence under pressure, endurance without applause. If you find value in exploring history through the lives people actually lived, beyond myths, beyond monuments, consider supporting the channel and sharing the video with someone who appreciates deeper stories and returning for more journeys into the past. Thank you for staying until the end.